Hello again. My name is Reverend Gregory Holston, and you are watching Just Nation, a program dedicated to issues of faith, justice, and race here in the city of Philadelphia and beyond. And we're excited to have this most important show today that deals with the upcoming election and all of its implications, addressing both the Black community and Philadelphia as a whole. And as always, my co-host is Nia Holston, attorney from the Abolitionist Law Center, and I'm certainly glad to see her and be with her again as we start this new season of Just Nation.
Yes, we're in, I guess it would be season 2 for those who are tuning in, and just really appreciative of those who've watched the shows and the conversations that we had in season 1, and just all of the fruitful discussions and actions and projects that have come out of that. So we're just really grateful. And today we have a great conversation, a very timely conversation ahead of us, one that impacts all of us. Regardless of outcome, it impacts all of us, and that's the election. So we want to talk specifically about all races, but in particular the presidential election. As folks know, the 2 nominees are for president are Kamala Harris, as well as Donald Trump.
Which was not the case about 8 weeks ago.
That's correct. That's correct. So
it's been quite a time in this transformation.
It's been quite a time, and because it's been so fast-paced, there are a lot of conversations that are being had about who to support, about what to support, about what does support for a particular candidate mean, how to push candidates. All of those conversations are percolating and happening, and so I'm hopeful that today we can have a conversation, particularly as we sit in Philadelphia, which, as we know, in elections throughout the years has really been the turning point, or the key factor in the state of where the election goes.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely, and the importance of this election around really the threat to democracy that exists. I don't think we've ever had an election quite like this. And of course, Philadelphia has always been crucial because Pennsylvania is crucial. That's why it's called the Keystone State. And it seems to always to be the actual key to who wins the election. And so we have some monumental issues we're addressing here in this election. And it's an important time for all of us to have this kind of conversation.
Yes. So to that end, we're really excited to have this rich discussion, this impactful discussion that touches on issues both as they relate to Philadelphians, and in particular Black Philadelphians, but also global issues around the world. And so we're gonna get started,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
we're gonna start by introducing some of our guests who are here with us today. So to my left, I have my esteemed comrade and my colleague, Sergio Highland, who's going to introduce himself to talk about some of the work that he does.
Okay, my name is Sergio Highland. I am an organizer with the Abolitionist Law Center. I'm also a criminal justice organizer with the Pennsylvania Working Families Party, formerly incarcerated. I went to prison when I was 19, spent the next 22 years where I was mentored at some point by some really great men such as Mumia Abu-Jamal, Russell Maroon Schultz, Joseph Jojo Bowen, and Salim Holbrook, who took me on as sort of like a younger brother, and sort of was able to become an organizer on the inside, organized voting rights, voting registration for families of incarcerated people. I got to study the law, started organizing grievance campaigns and boycotts and things like that. And when I was released from prison in February 2022, I came home and started doing the same thing, pretty much on a higher level than what I was doing on the inside.
So glad to have you here today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And also our guests that include Wendell Royster. Wendell, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and the work you've been involved with?
Sure. My name is Wendell Royster, Vice President of SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania. We service nursing home workers, hospital workers, and home health care aides across the state of Pennsylvania. We're about 28,000 strong. Mm-hmm. And I actually came to this work because I was introduced to the labor movement by a sister named Kathy Brady that actually passed away a couple years ago. But she dropped me off right in the labor movement, and I hit the ground running and never stopped since. I was a nursing home worker myself. I was a housekeeper, and I had got into some trouble with the law. And I decided to go get a job at the nursing home. So when I went in front of the judge, I can say, I have employment. And it was real, it was true. I stayed, you know, and what wound up happening is I got involved in the union. I went and did my time in the penitentiary, came home, and still had my job. And I wanted to know, how did that happen? How could a convicted felon still have a job working with elderly? And what I found out is that the language in the contract grandfathered me in. And once I came home, I took that book and put it under my arm. I learned a lot about what the union, you know, bargained for me, and was able to amplify that in a way that, first of all, came from a housekeeper to then, you know, the president of our local, when I say the president, meaning of my chapter of that nursing home, then became an e-board member, came on staff and started organizing nursing homes that wasn't organized, and brought in thousands of Philadelphians into SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And from there, you know, posted out to internally work in our union, where I serviced the people that we brought into the local. And then I want to say this is my third term as vice president of SEIU, the first black vice president of our local. Founder, one of the founders of Labor for Black Lives Coalition with Seth Anderson Oberman and Jared Smith. We founded that organization. And in SEIU, I'm also the chair of our AFRAM caucus, our Black and Brown Folks caucus. So that's just a little bit about myself. Just want to share. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And Linda, would you like to share just a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I'm a former labor organizer. I am I'm a retired member, but I'm also very active with labor with the CBTU. I work for 1199C, another healthcare union. We all started together years ago with Henry Nicholas and Mr. Black, and we've grown and developed over the years, and I've gotten a lot of my experience through that. I've been an advocate my entire life. I didn't share this, but when I was younger, I lived right off of Wyalusing, where there was an orphanage, and I would go by that gate with my grandfather and see the kids out there playing, and wanted to know why couldn't they come outside of the gate. I believe that was when I was about 8 or 9. I believe that's kind of when my advocacy began. And so my grandfather said, well, they're in an orphanage. They don't have parents like you do. And I said, well, I want to make them happy. I want to make them smile. I need to do something to bring some joy to them. And I made sock dolls. And with my grandmother's buttons and my grandfather's socks and his pipe cleaner. And I did a whole basket full of them, and he walked me over, and I was able to hand them through the gate. When I was doing that, they came and said I couldn't do that anymore. I got upset. We went to our city person and complained about it, and he said, well, we'll make you make a visit inside the orphanage, and then you can do it there. So that was the beginning of my advocacy, I believe, and then I've always been one that want to fight for the rights of other people. Yes. My brother also was in prison at Holmesburg, and I always wanted to fight for his rights, because he went to jail because he did the crime. But there were others there that did it, and I always wanted to do something about that. So advocacy and activism was always in my blood. I am now retired. I've run for the Senate. I've been a part of many organizations, and I've sat on many boards. And I'm currently the founder of the Power Up PAC, which educates and trains people that want to run for office for the right way and for the right reasons.
Great.
We do that, and then I was also elected to the DNC, and I just came from the convention, the 2024 convention, and you know, like I said, CBTU, 1199C, on various boards for pension education. So just been very active my whole life, fighting for the rights of people
Yes.
and the needs of people. And lastly, and most importantly, I'm a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you so much.
And so we have one more guest who's joining us on Zoom. Another one of my esteemed colleagues, former colleague, Saudia Durant. Saudia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you all see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Hey y'all, I'm Saudia Durant. She, her pronouns, live in West Philly, parents born in Southwest Philly. Right now, my role is a campaign strategist. I work at the Advancement Project, which is a national civil rights organization. Part of my current work right now is operating as a campaign strategist. So I work with youth and community-based organizations across the country who have campaigns focused on education justice issues, everything from school facilities, privatization, school closures, the school to prison pipeline, all the issues you can imagine related to young people learning in an environment where they can thrive in. That's a part of the work that I do. I started off very similar, like other folks shared on this panel. I started off as a labor organizer, so I worked at the Philly International Airport for a while as a bartender. I dealt with and witnessed lots of issues from sexual harassment and violence in the workplace, the low pay wages, to people having unstable working hours and conditions. Ended up working and organizing with Unite Here, which represents still to this day a lot of amazing champion unions in the airport, at the stadium, all across Philly. That's part of how I got my organizing boots, so to speak. I was doing door-to-door knocking, canvassing, surveying, doing delegations on Boston, were terrible. But I think one of my biggest accomplishments has been doing youth organizing and abolition work. So I was a youth organizer at the Philadelphia Student Union, helping young people to fight around issues related to schools. Obviously, Philly schools have constantly been in a dire situation from asbestos. We've had more toxic water than Flint, Michigan.
Yes.
We've had buildings and ceilings falling on young people in schools. And libraries closed, so a big chunk of my work was helping young people to organize campaigns, still in school funding. Similarly, Serge also worked as an organizer at Abolitionist Law Center, got to learn just incredible work from folks on the inside who are working to defund prisons and to decarcerate a lot of the experiences that people have that impact people on the inside as well as their families. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yes, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's always wonderful hearing everybody's story.
So rich, so much experiences to be able to share.
Yeah. So, I'm really excited. So let's just get into it. So as a sort of grounding question, I think it's important when we're talking about the election and we're talking about whether to support or not support a candidate, I think it's important to discuss what does support actually mean. Does a vote equal support? Is some support something more than just a vote? Or I shouldn't say just a vote, but what does it mean to support a candidate? Do you support all of their work or all of their policy positions? If you vote for a candidate, do you support everything that they do? So I'm interested to hear from our panelists what support does or does not mean. And so why don't we start with Wendell, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question first. Thank you for that. I think support looks different depending on what organization you come from or what organization you're representing at the particular time, or if you're just representing yourself. And when I say that, I say, and me and Ms. Linda had this conversation earlier, but for instance, if I'm speaking just of myself, Wendell Royster, and my vote, as an individual, that would mean just that I'm going in to click the lever for the person that I support, and might have a couple conversations with people along the way. What support looks like from an organizational standpoint is a little different because it depends on what the organization has invested. It could be PAC money. It could be, money that the organization is given to this candidate in their campaign. It can come with boots on the ground. Boots on the ground meaning knocking on doors. And that could be members volunteering to actually knock on doors or being paid to knock on doors for the candidate that they believe in. It also comes with support, meaning phone banking, calling individuals, calling your members to talk about that individual candidate. And it can mean several more things. We can put together like self-stories that we actually do. We take right now, Zoom and all the social media pieces is available. And what we usually do, if somebody feels strongly about a candidate, we would have you tell a little 60-second story of that candidate, and we would post it on social media to do certain things. So that's what support looked like as an individual, and that's what support looked like for some organizations, union organizations, that is backing the candidate.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sadia, do you wanna jump in here?
Sure, I can answer this. I think similar to what Wendell shared. I think support for a candidate means how are you building a relationship to hold this candidate accountable to what they share and what they commit to and what you and your base are also a commitment to. I think support can look like a lot of affirmative activities to demonstrate tangibly that you want to support this person, obviously through donations and fundraising, helping them to have platforms and communities to access communities where maybe that person or that candidate wouldn't normally be able to meet everyday grassroots folk. I think it can mean, helping to troubleshoot and work through messaging. What's the right messaging that this person with these ideas needs to maybe expand their language that they're doing or educate themselves on issues to make them a better candidate. I think this question is important about how do you support a candidate, and I think how you support a candidate is just as important and just as much tied to how do you support an issue. If an issue that you're concerned about is whether or not incarcerated people will have access to voting, you want to look for the candidate that supports that or seems like they would have the capability of understanding that issue, and then demonstrating what's needed. You need people in large numbers. You need organizations who can make financial commitments. You need messaging and communication so that as many platforms, as many communities that aren't the same, that are complex, will be able to understand how this candidate will help to create conditions to support their lives. I think it means a lot. I think it also means, though, sometimes supporting a candidate means pushing them when they're uncomfortable. I think sometimes supporting a candidate, if they're saying a politic that is disaligned, maybe with other stances that you have, if you care about that candidate, you care about their ability to develop and to sharpen over time.
Exactly.
And people don't sharpen their politics when they're not pushed, when they're not maybe in debates, if they don't get into disagreements that they can then resolve. I think supporting a candidate means doing all of those things the same way that you would want to support an issue to make sure that candidate addresses, changes, or supports that issue.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Linda, when you want to answer the same question?
Well, she kind of rounded it up.
She did. Yeah, excellent.
And I think support does come in various ways. And development is one of those big ways. Like she said, you have to challenge those candidates that you believe in and that they understand and have the same moral values that you do. Individually, that is a requirement for me, that you must exhibit the moral values and you have displayed or example to me that you genuinely care about the issues that I'm concerned about on an individual basis. Now, as far as an organization, I've started several, And so with that being said, in order for me to support a candidate, I want to make sure that the people that I'm working with are aligned with my beliefs, just like we together, Reverend Halston, began the Black Engagement Coalition, the Black Voter Engagement Coalition. We may have different policy concerns, but when you add it all up, it's aligned to what our beliefs are. And we make sure that we challenge the candidate that we're looking to push those policies and expand their services that they already have the advantage of having, expand them to ensure that it addresses the needs of the people. I'm a person that I am a Democrat, don't get it twisted, but I'm more about the people than I am about the politics. And so I'm more about the people and the policies than I am about the whole politic piece. But I understand the importance of making sure that my support that I give, and personally and organizationally, those people must align. And they may not like the things that I have to say, but you can guarantee they're going to hear it.
Serge?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, support for a candidate boils down to whether you like a candidate or not. Even if you only like a candidate slightly more than another candidate. And I think that any action that you take which propels a candidate towards success shows that you support that candidate. Now there's levels to it though, because I believe that the more you support, or the more you believe in a candidate, the more intense your support for that candidate is. So it goes from just casting a ballot to talking to family members or community members or raising money. As far as a belief system, I remember reading a lot about Malcolm X, and one of the things that he used to say a lot is that you could search the entire earth and you wouldn't find two people who agree on everything.
That's right.
So you're never going to find a candidate who may hold every single value that you hold or position that you hold. So it's like what Saudia was saying, it just boils down to, do you hold more of my values than the opposing candidate? And if you do, then I have to accept where you're lacking at. And like Saudia said again, it's a growing process, and that's when you begin to hold the person accountable throughout their candidate. I mean, throughout their time in office, and they grow and they sharpen, and then you can maybe push them to more to your values. Unfortunately, a lot of people in our community need immediate relief, and they associate the stimulus package and things like that with Donald Trump.
Which is not true, but we'll talk
Right,
about
right,
Yes,
exactly, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Much.
And because of that, that is where people's values are into surviving. And so some candidates just know how to manipulate what's going on out there, and that's why it's important for education in our communities.
Absolutely.
And we need to say for the record that the Democrats, particularly Speaker Pelosi, made that stimulus happen.
Yes, she did.
It was Donald Trump who, I guess smartly, made sure that his name was on the check.
To sign the checks, right.
About money that he opposed, but he made sure his name was on the check to make it appear like it came from him, but it came from the leadership of the Democratic Party.
You know, there's so much, and thank everyone for what was said. There's so much that's like percolating in my head right now about what we can say, and I really appreciate what everyone said, but in particular, Saudia, what you said about supporting a candidate or even participating in a process, whether or not you can bring yourself to say you support a candidate, is about refining and sharpening their political ethic, right? And so much of the work that I think all of the people on this panel do is about building power, and building power and creating the conditions so that they have no choice but to support the policies and the initiatives and that our communities want, right? And so, I'm thinking of, Professor Derek Bells. I'm thinking of his idea of interest convergence, the idea that for many people, particularly white people, they're never going to agree with us on particular issues, right? But it's about creating the conditions, economic or otherwise, to force that agreement and to recognize that those issues are very much related. And so even with support for a candidate, it doesn't necessarily signal even that you like a person. You may like them personally. It may not signal that. You may vote for a person and say, I don't support this person at all, right? But I think there's that clarity there about what it means to build power. And I'm always reminded, for me personally, and we all have so many stories. In 2012, I went to the Democratic National Convention as a delegate from Connecticut. I'm from Pennsylvania. Don't worry about that. Don't ask questions. I went from Connecticut, whatever. This was a little bit earlier in my political development, so I've kind of grown and shifted since then. But I was a delegate to the 2012 National Convention, and I remember being with another delegate and them saying to me about why the Democratic Party engages in, with certain communities, namely seniors, versus not engaging with our people in Philly, our Black people in Philly. And they said, well, if people aren't going to vote, then, isn't it just easier to go and get the votes from the senior citizens home rather than going somewhere else? And so, there's so much inherent within that is disappointing, that is really frustrating. But really spells it out clearly that we have a mandate to build power, because they're not just going to give it to us. So anyway,
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
That's exactly why I started the Power Up PAC, to develop power, to educate people about how things function. You mentioned nursing homes. While I was an organizer for the union, I serviced lots of nursing homes in Pennsylvania, and what I was discovering, and I reported it to the voter services here in Philadelphia, that and the state, that whoever is running that facility at the time, if they're a Democrat or Republican, they will go to those seniors that don't know any difference, register them as a Republican, and send in their mail-in ballots based on their beliefs, not the belief of those individuals. And I called for an investigation through Henry Nicholas, because I knew that these people's rights were being violated, and there was, I had to get workers to tell me, but they were afraid to say it as a testimony to what the administrators or whoever was running the nursing homes were doing, because they were afraid for their jobs. And so those are the kinds of things that go on when they say, why not go to the seniors? This is the easiest thing in the world to do, because if they're at a certain point in their mental capacity, they don't know what's happening. They're just going along because the nurse is being nice to them, or the administrator is being nice to them. They're giving away their votes. And so I did call for a statewide investigation on nursing homes for that very reason.
Well, thank you for that work. And that talks a lot about some of the practical things that go around elections. And I want to come back to that, particularly about people who suppress our vote because they know I got this amount of votes here, and therefore I really don't want everybody else to vote because they might vote against me, but I know these votes will vote for me, so they actually suppress the vote in our community. But I want to go back to this idea of what support means. There was an election that a candidate took a position that was just something I could not ever agree with. And even though I agreed with a lot of the other issues that candidate was doing, because of that one issue, I could not countenance voting for that person. Is there issues that you think are of such a moral level where you simply cannot vote for that person because of that issue, even though you agree with them on many others. Is there any issue like that for you? Or were you like, no, that's a line for me, cannot do that?
Well, I mean, let's say it plain right now. I mean, there is a genocide going on across the world.
And I didn't want to identify just that one.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk generally, but yes, I know that some people definitely feel that about what's
Yeah.
happening in Gaza right now. But,
Yeah,
so-
and there is a real disappointment, I think, for many people with the continuation of empire and, you know, America's complicity in these very real issues. And for many people, particularly, I won't just say my generation, I won't just say that, but for many people, they're looking to see some sort of shift from an administration that has been the most strident supporter of the government in Israel in recent memory. And so I do think that is one issue, and you said there are certainly others as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that in terms of what support means and what it means you cannot give support, even though the other person may do other stuff that's even more awful, but it's just of a moral position for you that you simply just can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Is there places like that? Is there issues like that? My daughter just named obviously what happened in Gaza. Is there any other issues like that are like that for you? Or can you work with a politician even when you agree fervently against one position they make?
Serge, you wanna?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this may not be very popular amongst a lot of my friends, but recently what's not being talked about much is that the DNC took off of their list of demands that the death penalty be abolished in an attempt to look, you know, tougher on crime. That's an issue with me because I'm formerly incarcerated, and I'm very aware of the tension with capital punishment, the anxiety, the depression. I was around people who were on death row. Several of them have been exonerated since. And so we know that the death penalty is, its origins are racist, classist, and it still exists in that way. We saw Donald Trump go on a spree of executions before he left office. And I'm sure several of those people could have been exonerated. You know, it's estimated that around 10% of people on death row are innocent. And so to see the DNC scratch that from their list, it really is causing sort of like an internal conflict for somebody like me who wants to support a potential first black woman president. So I need to hear more about what they're doing to reverse that stance. So that is an issue for me, but definitely what's going on in Palestine for sure. But we talk about that a lot. People are very aware of that. People aren't very aware of this death penalty situation.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to come back to this. Anybody else, any issues that are just of such a level where you just simply can't countenance voting for that person, even if the other person on the other side is worse?
I have a
I'm
real.
definitely. Oh, Jane. you
I'm
go
sorry,
first.
I
No,
didn't.
no, you go, baby.
I was gonna say nose goes. I think for me, Mia definitely named one. I think having a president who supports, you know, or helps to arm another country bombing black and brown folks, and I mean that's for Palestine, that's for any country, that's for Sudan, the Congo, like any president who is excited about the U.S. maintaining its role of violence in another country is always a red flag for me. I also think In terms of undocumented communities coming to the U.S., their treatment at the border, as well as someone who believes in increasing funding for the police, are two, I think, additional red flags for me. I think even thinking about, coming out of I know I'm only in my early 30s, so I'm gonna quote this like I was, in college when this happened, when I wasn't, but I remember like going from a Bush, administration, 2001, remembering September 11th and how so many Black and brown folks, as well as like, folks from other countries coming here immediately being treated as or seen as terrorists. Like, I remember that in school. I remember, metal detectors popping up in schools after 9/11. And I also remember just a lot of Islamophobia, just being normalized so heavily. I think because of that, seeing, Democratic presidents like, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and now also Kamala Harris, she's named as president, like, I see them as I found it very difficult. I think my first experience voting was for Barack Obama. And while, this piece about representation and having Black leadership or Black faces in high places, sure, felt exciting, I think there was also something alarming about our communities not having a strengthened internationalist analysis as well as a class analysis, like knowing that historically policing and prisons have come from the role of slave catchers in society, capturing Black people and separating children from families. It really disgusts me when I see a Democratic president, increasing border control, increasing surveillance in Black and brown neighborhoods, or using, some of the ads that I've heard from both Democratic and Republican parties have been like, folks coming from the border are these dangerous criminals, and we need strong border control and security. That feels definitely alarming when so much of that language has been used on Black folks. Seeing after X amount of years of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and Sean Bell and Sandra Bland, and then, the Black women who have been murdered this year by police, and still seeing candidates be 10 toes down for increasing policing, I think, because to me, that ultimately signifies our support for a candidate is based on their support around an issue. So when candidates are 10 toes down, when they use language to make us feel like we're all a part of the same community, but then you're 10 toes down on an issue that I could be shot by police at any point with no accountability for an officer. He would have his vacation time secured, he would be on paid leave. I think funding the police, border control, and like xenophobia towards folks coming from other countries has always been a red flag for me when choosing a candidate, even if they're not a Republican.
Yeah, so Saudia, can I push back on that a little bit, or push you on that? Is any in there that are just, well, I can't vote for the person, or any of those things just concerns where I can support the person, but we got some talking to do, we got some pushing to do, we got some organizing to do, we got some stuff we have to do to make sure that this person really lines up more fairly with our community? Which is which in your mind? And I think that's critical for a lot of people on a lot of different issues of how do you make that judgment?
I think two things can be true at the same time. I think me or someone said this earlier, like I could fully dislike and probably question the morality of a candidate who would authorize bombing another country with brown folks. I do, as an organizer, with my organizing hat on, and I took off my, Saudia and individual hat, I think of course, and that's what we saw happening with Kamala, right? We saw as she became clearly the nomination once Biden announced stepping back, we saw, Palestinian organizers pushing her to have a meeting with them about what would be possible on the table if there couldn't be full, perfect, I hate to say perfect because that's not what we're aiming for, but full alignment? Like, could a ceasefire be put on the table, if not, you know, a full-out ending of the war, the U.S.'s role? I think to your point, I agree that there's always conversations that can be had, and also choosing of, I guess, harm reduction work. I also think that for many decades, we've seen politicians who are less conservative Democrat leaders who gotten their vote, did their 8 years, never moved closer to the middle and maintained their position, that then leads people to feel like, are these debates getting us anywhere? Or is voting for this person to then push them another 4 years and then they're out, then I start back over with the next person. So I hear you, and I do think conversations can be had.
Go ahead, Linda. Then Wendell.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sadia.
Thank you, Sonia. Over the years, I've learned that, and I use the scripture where the person will take the crumbs from underneath the table rather than not have anything at all. I would like to see movement and improvement, but if there's a hard stop for me to continue to kill people, it would be very, very difficult for me to believe in or trust that person and vote for them. And that's just the truth. But I have to know and educate myself around their policies and the things that they have done up until that point. But if I constantly see people murdering people and killing people, like guys that are on death row and the people in Gaza, and they don't move on it or they waver, a person that is double-minded in all of their ways. And I stick with the scripture of God. I trust his word, I believe what he says, and I see the results of those things. So yes, for me, if you show me, I believe you.
Wendell?
I think what everyone said kind of sums up the way that I feel as well. I don't have any different perspective on this particular question.
Any
itself.
one issue that is just like, nah, I can't vote for you. You take that position, nah, I can't vote. That's it. You cut, man. That's all.
I hate
You're
to
done.
say it, but that other guy demonstrated everything that I would be against.
That's real. That's
Okay.
wrong.
That guy, Trump,
Yeah.
everything that he has done and everything that I have seen is that hard line for me that I wouldn't vote for him,
Yeah. And so I
ever.
Thank you. Go ahead.
so Serge, I want to go back to your point. You know, in terms of thinking about, you know, the death penalty and the effects of that. And I remember in the spring of 2016, where I mean, I'll just say it, when Scalia died, and I was working at an organization that's an anti-death penalty organization where, in addition to doing, you know, advocacy work, we also represented people on death row in Alabama. And I remember he had an execution date. That execution date came, and he was able to get a stay of his execution. And then the appeal, which was centered on the idea that you can't kill someone who has no, because of their lack of mental faculties, can't even comprehend where they are or why they're there or anything like that. His case was taken to the Supreme Court in the later on. And so because Scalia had not been replaced yet, there was space to move on those issues. And so, you know, there are the real tangible effects and impacts of that I've seen where I've talked to people, just like you, Serge, where I'm like, if this candidate is in office, you literally won't be here.
Yes.
And having that tangible, I think, understanding of like it's not just systemic, and not to say systemic is any less than, but I'm dealing with you on a personal level and recognizing and understanding that this person that I care about will literally not be here because of this. You know, there are so many nuances to all of this, but I've never forgotten that. And I've never forgotten that it is so important while we're fighting, while we're agitating, while we're doing all of this work, to never forget the real people who were at the center of this, and literally it's life or death, not a joke. And so I appreciate you for bringing that up. And so that, you know, I wouldn't say that's a red line for me. I would say it's more like a guiding line, you know, in terms of my thinking, in terms of the issues that I care about. And we saw people literally die because Trump got elected, particularly who, as you mentioned, Serge, those who were on death row. And so I can hold that and still be like, I have to vote because of this, but at the same time, still be frustrated as hell with what the Democrats are doing and still be disgusted by it.
Deceived.
Yeah, and so that is powerful. I think that's where a lot of people are at, that they seen some things they clearly are frustrated with whatever the issue they may have. It could be the poverty they see in their communities, and see that Democrats have not really addressed that poverty that's been there for 60 years in parts of North Philadelphia and Southwest Philadelphia. And I wonder, why should I vote when I still see the same thing going on? And so whatever that line is, where I can't be a part of voting for that person because they're really not come up with a plan to transform my life. But your phrase, Nia, this is a guiding line for me. Not a red line of not voting, but a guiding line that if I do vote, that I'll push on, that I'll push on this issue. I'll push the candidate that I think I can push the most, and I'll vote for that one because I might be able to get more out of that one than the other one on the issues I care about.
But push through all the time.
Push, always push.
And it never, like,
Always push.
it never ends.
Well, the one thing that I did as a union organizer when we were doing the voter registration and voter education was asking our members when they joined the union, why did they join the union?
Yeah.
What did they see that liberated them enough? And they always went with the money and the contract. And so I asked them, I said, do you know, we don't realize all of our power that we have. Because just like you voted for the union to come in, you rebelled against the boss and his oppression. If you do the same thing as a registered voter, if we would just utilize our power and show up, do you know who your state rep is? Do you know who your city, do they know who you are? That's even more important, because when you go to him and say, I'm in this union, and he knows that that union put money in his PAC and used those people, members, to knock on doors for them to get elected, their perspective is completely different than someone that they've never seen or spoken to before. So we have to learn how to utilize our power. And I say that, my daughter and I had the conversation just the other day. I put it on Facebook. We have these companies, Ford and all of these companies that's going against DEI. At the end of the day, we should be not spending our dollars with these companies.
Yeah.
We should not be spending our dollars with these companies, no matter what sacrifice you have to make. Don't buy a Ford, turn your Ford in. If you have a credit card with a certain company that goes against the beliefs of what we believe in and our rights, get rid of that credit card. You know, when they start seeing money speaks, this color green means something. And we have the power because we are the biggest commodity in this country, black and brown
and
people.
growing. Excellent points, because all of this is about your vote being attached to something greater.
Yes.
Your support being attached to something more than your vote. Attached to organization, attached to organizing, attached to community, attached to the issues for that community. And what do you do to transform those issues based on what the community wants?
Yeah.
What is your part? See, what we used to call this, when I was growing up, they used to teach what was called civics.
Yep.
The idea of what it means to be a citizen. And that the citizenship is more than simply voting. It is engaging.
Yep.
It is knowing what your city council is doing. It is knowing what your state rep is doing. It's knowing what your state government is doing. It's aware of what the White House going on in the White House. It is clean plugged in to the community organization that addresses those issues, so you know when to call, when to take the time instead of brushing your teeth or all the other stuff you do during the course of a day. You got lined up. This is my time to be a citizen. I'm calling in to let them know I'm not happy with the choices that they're making right now. It is this process that we're trying to build again in our communities, this sense of citizenship, so that they know when we give our support, all of this other stuff comes along with it, our responsibility to hear
Their jobs.
Yes, yes.
Could I wanted to just go back on the red flag, red line thing, because I think what I see happening is folks are quickly approaching the red line instead of having these type of conversations. Folks are rushing to say that this is my final straw, I can't move because of this issue. I think what I see happening is a lot of people are rushing to that instead of having the dialogue that might be able to move them closer to voting in a certain way. Again, not liking everything the candidate might do or stand for, but what I hear now is a lot of folks, I'm not voting.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't like this person or I don't like that person. And I think it's a conversation that really needs to be had there. And this is that conversation. And this is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. And we have to spend more time doing just what we're doing now. Getting people into explaining to me a little bit more, how did you get to that red flag or that red line? Like where you automatically just made that halt all of a sudden. I think it's the easy way out for folks. Folks are, they are running to that quicker than standing up and having this type of conversation that we're having now, which can move people's thoughts. It can move you, it can push you. You spoke a little bit earlier about Palestine. And from my understanding, the way that I look at the presidency is I am organizer first. I negotiate contracts. I still think we are in the negotiation process of negotiating about making sure that whoever this next president is move this quickly. You know, and we can tie it to the vote, but that's a dangerous thing to do.
Yep.
You know, now when you tie that to the vote, that means these votes are swaying towards the orange dude, Donald Trump. If we hold this up like that, if we want to hold these votes or hold this accountability to that,
Well,
and I'm a little nervous about
I
that.
hear what you're saying, but you know, we've been doing this, and we've been doing this for 40 years. How many times did we vote for somebody and hold our nose, you know, on some stuff, and they didn't do what they were supposed to do? And so I got you. I got what you said. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I just want to bring in another perspective around this piece about like what not voting may or may not aid to, or the reasoning behind it. I think one thing that I want to name is that there are definitely class divides in the Black community, and there's generational divides.
Yes,
like
it is.
obviously Blackness is not a monolith. So although white America might want us to think that this is true, like all Black folks do not think exactly the same,
That's
live
true.
exactly the same, have the same worldview, right? But we know that our experience, despite the complexity of it, our ethnicity, like places that we've come from internationally across the African diaspora, like I think there's a lot of things that get sometimes overcomplicated in relation to Black people and how they vote. I think one thing to name is that there is a big class divide. Like you have Black folks who exist in like maybe what someone would call the middle class, where yes, it feels maybe more important to have a more reasonable, liberal, or progressive democratic president who won't raise the taxes too high, who won't increase unemployment, who won't, increase certain things financially that could be more cushy for the average Black American, in like the I don't know, if I'm thinking about like the
We
Living
control
Single
that.
cast and how they were displayed on the show, or Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or whatever, they were rich. But I think there's a big divide when we get into these conversations about Palestine and even the president, when there are Black working class, poor folks who don't want to participate in a capitalist society where there's no free education, free housing, or guaranteed income. I think for many folks, Black folks, young
Saudi,
Black folks who.
if I could, we're about 5 minutes left of the show, so this is a good
Oh,
time.
no.
Yeah, I know, but you're doing great, and I'm gonna give you this opportunity to kind of sum up as well some of your points, but please go ahead. Sorry I had to interrupt
Be
you.
concise. No, it's okay. I heard you. Be concise. Get to it. I think what I just want to say is that for many Black folks, and in general, I think if the question of stopping 40,000 Black skinned and brown skinned folks from dying is on the line with the vote, and both candidates are for supporting that, then I think we need to open up our value assessment as a Black community as what are the I think absolute no's are absolutely okay in trying to create a nation where all Black people are thriving. Not certain Black people, but all. If I think about the bomb that was dropped in Philadelphia, if I think about the bomb that was dropped in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I think for us, this is a question of what step will we take to have a country that actually serves all Black people's livelihoods and their humanity? And there's something wrong with our political system if we have two candidates where both will pursue and support that violence happening. And I just think there's larger conversations to unpack the complexity of voting and why someone would feel apathetic if their two valid votes come down to bombing a brown country and it'll feel like Jim Crow 60s, or bombing a brown country and it'll feel like the 60s, but maybe more nicer, or maybe the healthcare will be a little bit better. I can afford my prescription drugs. I think that is something that could cause apathy that we have to address.
Okay, thank you. So we all have about 4 minutes left, so we can give you about 30 seconds to kind of just sum up this conversation. And Linda, I'm gonna ask you if you could raise one of the down ballot elections as well, the Attorney General piece as well, just to mention that. So Serge, just kind of summing up our conversation, what points you might want to sum up in the next 30 seconds.
Yeah, we just came off of Labor Day, where we celebrated workers and their efforts and the attempt to raise the minimum wage because it's $7.25 still in PA. And I just want to lift up the fact that there are 2 million incarcerated workers who don't get benefits, who don't get retirement funds, who don't get health care, who aren't represented, and who have to work at the demand of any staff member. And countless incarcerated people die because of that. And so I think that this is just as an important issue as anything else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wendell, you want to go ahead?
Well, I just want to remind everybody to visit votepa.gov to make sure that you know the mail-in ballot, the last day to register to vote, the mail-in ballots, as well as the last day to get those ballots in before they're not counted. Check with your county, your local counties, because while I represent the entire state, I want to make sure that each county understands the rules of your county. Please, please, please check your county website and make sure you have the correct dates and the locations where you could drop off your ballots, or you could mail in your ballots, and where your location, your main voter location office is. Lastly, those checks that Trump signed, that's all he did. And we got to remember, get the facts. Stop listening to what people say. Do your own research and learn the truth. Politicians will do what they need to do to get elected. And lastly, we have an attorney general that's running for office. His name is Eugene DePasquale. He is about doing what is needed for Black people. And how do I know? Because Reverend Holston and I and several other community leaders from across the state is holding him accountable and asking him the hard questions and doing the things that we discussed today. And he's saying yes, yes, and yes. We will do those things. We will make sure that Black people are engaged in his office as it expands the services that they offer, because we don't even know all the things that his office services and offers. So please vote.
Thank you. Wendell?
Yeah, so.
30 seconds.
Yeah, not a problem. I just want to say this is the opportunity to beat back that Project 2025. We have an opportunity to, make sure that that never happens. And it's really up to every one of us that's in Pennsylvania, because it was said already earlier in the show that the road to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue comes through Pennsylvania, and it definitely will come to Philadelphia, and we have an opportunity to make sure that we elect the right person in and not let this Project 2025 prevail.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I just want to say, and I want to do it quickly, and we had so much to get to also in this conversation. I just want to say, so we may need to do a part 2. We also wanted to talk about the attacks, the racist attacks on Kamala Harris, and what that means, for all of us, right? And how does that influence or not influence our support? So we didn't even get to that. So please continue to tune in, because there are more conversations that need to be had. But I want to say, I'm so glad this conversation needs to be had. Saudia is right, it is generational. We have very real reasons for voting or for not voting. And those perspectives and opinions need to be respected if we want to move forward in whatever way. And mentorship is important, community is important. And so we have to continue to participate in these conversations, even though they feel hard, even though they feel frustrating, right? And so even if they feel, because it gets us to a place where we are actually closer to what we want. And we do have the things that we want, and we are building that power, so.
We thank you so much again for watching our program. We'll see you again next month on another edition of Just Nation. Thank you so much.